And welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, anti-Israel protesters caused chaos at the White House.
Meanwhile, Benny Gantz resigns from Israel's war cabinet.
And 4 hostages are saved in a daring rescue. All right, well, we start with the weekend chaos in Washington, D.C., where police pepper sprayed anti-Israel demonstrators outside the White House. Protesters on Saturday were seen launching smoke flares and blocking roads, demanding President Biden free Palestine.
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
President Biden was overseas in France when the demonstration took place. No arrests were made. This, of course, is just the latest in a series of anti-Israel protests rocking the country, most notably on college campuses, but also taking place in many major cities as well.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration and Alejandro Mayorkas are in the hot seat over their late response to the border crisis. ABC's Martha Raddatz pressed the Homeland Security Secretary on the Biden administration's late immigration enforcement. When she asked how many illegal immigrants have been turned away from the border since the law went into effect, Mayorkas said that the ban's goal was to change the risk calculus of those crossing the border.
Martha, we're at a very early stage. Implementation, as you noted, has just begun. Our intent is to really change the risk calculus of individuals before they leave their countries of origin and incentivize them to use the lawful pathways that we have made available to them and keep them out of the hands of exploitative smugglers. It's early. The signs are positive. Our personnel have done an extraordinary job in implementing a very big shift in how we operate on the southern border.
But Raddatz wasn't convinced. She then played a clip from 3 years ago when Mayorkas claimed everything was under control.
It's tough, but we can do it. This is what we do, and we will accomplish our mission.
We will succeed. That was 3 years ago. Since then, 6.5 million migrants have been apprehended along the southern border. It would be very hard to call that a success.
Martha, remember something, that migration is a dynamic phenomenon. It is something that we alone are, it's not just us who is experiencing it.
Now, Republicans in particular responded to the Biden administration's new border policy as nothing but a game just before the November elections.
At the same time, illegal immigrants are having a major impact on the job market. A new report from the House Budget Committee shows more than half of all new jobs are going to immigrants, regardless of their legal status. Committee Chair Jody Arrington said, quote, "In May, the unemployment rate grew to 4% and the labor participation rate dropped yet again, setting us even further back from pre-pandemic levels." He went on to say this, quote, "Furthermore, the job growth numbers under Biden are misleading. Reports show that upwards of half the job gains under Biden have come from illegal immigrants, which belies a far weaker economy than Democrats want you to believe." It's estimated that roughly 6.6 million Americans were unemployed in May. That's an increase of roughly 100,000 from April, and that's despite the creation of nearly 300,000 jobs.
At the same time, Republicans are pushing back against the Democrat get-out-the-vote efforts on college campuses. Democrats have been utilizing the federal work-study program to recruit students for their voter registration efforts. According to the Washington Examiner, secretaries of state from Democrat-run states have urged the Biden administration to use federal funding to support the upcoming elections. Republicans are now trying to make sure that taxpayer dollars aren't going toward this liberal agenda. House Administration Committee Chairman Representative Brian Steele sent a letter to the universities of Wisconsin asking for confirmation that these schools haven't used taxpayer money to support partisan politics. Steele asked for assistance from the president of the universities so that the institutions would avoid these pitfalls this year. President Jay Rothman has not responded to Steele's request publicly.
And speaking of the election, Donald Trump drew a massive crowd in Las Vegas yesterday. That would be his first rally since his conviction in New York. Trump is currently leading Biden over 5 points in Nevada, despite losing the battleground state in the last 2 elections. And to further advance his lead, Trump appealed to Las Vegas's massive service industry by vowing to make tips tax-free.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips. We're not going to do it, and we're going to do that right away, first thing in office, because it's been a point of contention for years and years and years, and you do a great job of service, you take care of people, and I think it's going to be something that really is deserved.
Trump also raised the issue of immigration, a winning issue for the former president and a leading concern for voters alongside the economy.
The illegal immigrants are turning, and they're turning at a level that nobody's ever seen before. They're fighting our families. They're totally destroying our black population. They're totally destroying our Hispanic population. And you know what else they're destroying? And for you it means a little bit less, but it means quite a bit in this state. They're killing unions. They're killing unions because the unions are not able to survive.
As we just mentioned last week, President Biden announced new asylum restrictions between ports of entry at the southern border in hopes of curbing illegal immigration before the election. Trump slammed the policy during yesterday's speech, calling it both weak and ineffective.
Meanwhile, Supreme Court justices are set to go on recess at the end of this month, but multiple important cases are still undecided. It's been a contentious cycle for the justices who've had their legitimacy challenged during a heated election year. The pressure is mounting for the court, which is expected to make several major decisions this month. This includes telehealth abortion pills and a challenge to the Chevron deference principle, which allows overseeing federal agencies to interpret unclear statutes. However, one of the largest unanswered questions remains with former President Donald Trump's immunity claims. A favorable decision could upend 2 federal cases against him, one related to his possession of classified documents after his term, and the other is his alleged attempt to overturn the 2020 elections. And finally, hundreds of January 6 plaintiffs accused of felony obstruction wait to see if the Supreme Court will overturn those charges. The rare crime is punishable by up to 20 years in prison. And we'll get into international news when we come back from this break.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Do you know what you are supporting when you purchase mutual funds and stocks? Think about it. When you invest in a company, you make a decision to support the things that that company supports. And it may not be things that you agree with. Financial Issues is a ministry teaching people like you how to invest biblically, responsibly, keeping your investments clear of companies that may support an ungodly agenda. Learn more by going to financialissues.org. Financialissues.org.
But I felt very comfortable in that decision because I found a lot of support. Like everyone here, always made sure keep in contact with me. This is what ultimately changed my decision, knowing that I had all this support that I didn't know I had. Now that he's here and he's 4 months old, I look at him and I honestly, it just makes me want to cry.
welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's jump into some updates from Israel. War Cabinet member Benny Gantz announced his resignation yesterday after months of threats. He accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of putting his own political survival first instead of the country's security needs.
Regrettably, Netanyahu is preventing us from advancing toward true victory, which is the justification for the ongoing and painful cost of war. That is why we are leaving the emergency government today, with a heavy heart but with full confidence.
But he added that he believes both the Prime Minister and Yoav Gallant will do the right thing, meaning they will concede and help establish a two-state solution.
I was very privileged, together with my friends, to bring to the cabinet room all the experience we have. I know that the other people are staying there, mainly Yoav Gallant and Prime Minister himself. They know what should be done. Hopefully they will stick to what should be done, and then it will be okay.
Meanwhile, Laura Blumenfeld from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies said that Gantz's move will shift things towards more hardliners on the right, weakening the Israeli-U.S. trust.
Gantz was a moderate voice in the cabinet, the interwar cabinet that Netanyahu was leading, and with him gone, it sort of tugs all the decisions to the right and to the more extreme. The second problem is that Netanyahu, with the success of the hostage rescue, is more likely to dig in and to say, it's better to shoot now and negotiate later. Let's follow my lead rather than Gantz's. The third problem is, look, there's very little trust between government officials from the United States and Netanyahu.
And speaking of the war in Gaza, we go now to FISM's Ian Patrick for a look at a daring hostage rescue undertaken by the IDF.
The IDF pulled a dangerous hostage rescue operation over the weekend, resulting in the recovery of 4 Israelis held since the October 7th terror attack. The operation's success was announced by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday.
Israel just carried out a remarkable rescue operation of 4 hostages held by Hamas. This operation required ingenuity and courage of the highest degree, and our soldiers performed in an unmatchable way.
The 4 hostages were kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th when Hamas raided the Israeli homeland. IDF Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari gave the names of all 4 who had been rescued and further explained the operation itself.
Israeli Special Forces conducted complex hostage rescue mission and successfully rescued 4 of our hostages from Hamas captivity in Gaza. Noar Gamani, Almog Meir Jan, Shlomi Ziv, and Andrei Kozlov. They are back home in Israel. They are alive, they are well. This was a high-risk complex mission based on precise intelligence conducted in daylight. Israeli forces have been preparing for this rescue mission for weeks. They underwent intensive training. They risked their lives to save the lives of our hostages.
The operation took place in a residential neighborhood within Al-Nusayrat, a city found in central Gaza. It took place with cooperation between officers of the National Police Special Anti-Terror Unit of Yamam and the Shin Bet Security Agency. Reports suggest that the officers had to simultaneously raid 2 Hamas-controlled buildings to pull off the daring operation. Noah Argamani, one of the hostages, was found at one of the sites, while the other 3 were saved from the second location. An air assault was also recorded in the same area during the rescue operation. Now, upon entry into the building, Israeli forces were met with gunfire from Hamas guards, and when they left the building with hostages in tow, they were also met with outgoing gunfire and even fire from RPGs. More Israeli forces were called in to help everyone get to safety, which they did. There were some casualties recorded during the assault, however, on both sides. Yamam Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora was critically injured during the operation, and he later died from his injuries. Reports also show that just under 100 Palestinians were killed in the raid, but as of right now, it's unknown how many of them were terrorists. Hamas even tried to claim that some hostages were killed during the rescue, but that claim was rejected by an Israeli spokesperson as being, quote, a blatant lie. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told CNN that the U.S. is looking into the situation to hopefully get a more accurate count on how many may have perished.
We, the United States, are not in a position today to make a definitive statement about that. The Israeli Defense Forces have put out one number. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry has put out another number. But we do know this, Dana. Innocent people were tragically killed in this operation. The exact number we don't know, but innocent people were killed, and that is heartbreaking. That is tragic.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks so much for that report, Ian, letting us know what's going on the ground in Gaza. Speaking of which, more than 1 million pounds of much-needed aid crossed into the region this weekend. Problems, of course, have plagued U.S. efforts to bring supplies by sea into Gaza. After a delayed opening, a $230 million American-made pier operated for only about a week before a storm blew it apart, something we reported here on FISM News when it happened. CENTCOM on Friday said that U.S. troops successfully restored that pier without any boots on the ground, and officials now expect 1 million pounds of aid to be delivered by sea every 2 days into Gaza.
Meanwhile, in a historic move, French President Emmanuel Macron dissolved his country's lower house of parliament following a crushing defeat from his country's populist right-wing party.
After having carried out the consultations provided by Article 12 of our Constitution, I've decided to give you back the choice of our parliamentary future through a vote. I am therefore dissolving the National Assembly this evening.
Je dissous donc ce soir l'Assemblée nationale.
This is a serious and weighty decision, but above all, it is an act of trust. Confidence in you, my dear compatriots, in the ability of the French people to make the right choice, in the ability of the French people to make the just choice.
Euronews reports that the National Rally Party took 30% of votes in the European parliamentary elections. Macron's centrist party will likely win only 15%. The Populist Party appeals to the masses with a commitment to stricter immigration policies, lower living costs, and lower crime rates. One right-wing leader stated that Macron must now abandon his agenda focused on reducing retirement pensions and raising energy prices. Macron fired back, saying that nationalists will impoverish France. The election will be held later this month and is a gamble for the French president, who currently has an approval rating of 21%.
Certainly a possibility that will come back to bite him. We'll just wait and see. Finally, as promised, South Korea has restarted its loudspeaker campaign against the North as Pyongyang continues sending trash balloons over the border. Over the weekend, over 300 sewage-filled balloons floated into South Korea, prompting Seoul to finally take action. The South is now blaring propaganda messages across the border into the North with speakers that can be heard up to 12 miles away in a tactic not used since 2018. Officials described the messages as unbearable for the North Korean regime, but a source of hope and light to the North Korean people. All right, and we have plenty more news to get to up next, but first, let's go to Seth Udinsky with a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, in this segment, friends, let's go back to the twilight of the Roman Empire, where in 379 AD, Theodosius I became emperor of the Eastern Empire. Divided for the first time under Diocletian in 285, the empire had been in decline and was now facing threats on all sides. But more than the forces on the outside, the classical Roman Empire was being overtaken by a force more powerful than any political system in the ancient world: Christianity. Let's explore the triumph of Christianity in ancient Rome under the Emperor Theodosius. Now, historians usually recognize Theodosius' predecessor Constantine the Great as the first, quote, Christian emperor of Rome. But under Constantine in the early 4th century, Christianity was merely legalized. So basically, Christians no longer needed to fear being burned at the stake or being fed to the lions for their faith. Theodosius, however, took the next step. He declared Christianity to be the official, unquestioned state religion of the empire in 381. His jurisdiction only extended to the Eastern Empire at this time, which made up most of Greece, parts of Turkey, and sections of the lower Near East. But But in 392, he gained control of the Western Empire as well and reunited, at least for the time, the East and West. Rome's absolute rule over the known world briefly resumed. And as such, Christianity, which was already gaining steam in the last few decades, began to spread at a far more rapid pace all throughout the empire. The Christian religion reached the deserts of the Near East, the Baltic region around the Black Sea, the North African coast, and the furthest reaches of Britain in the west. As for Theodosius, he died in 395, and less than a century later, the empire, at least in the west, died with him at the hands of the Visigoths in 476, when they dethroned the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus. But as Rome fell and medieval Europe began to take shape, Christianity grew in strength and would soon become the defining cultural and societal force in the former Roman world. Thanks so much for joining me once again for a moment in history.
On the day I found I was pregnant, I was full of emotions and I just was so overwhelmed, and I don't know if I'm ready for this huge life-altering, changing commitment. I had individuals around me not wanting me to have this child. And somehow, and I was driving and I saw the Women's Help Center sign and I immediately turned in. That just took relief off of me, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. They gave me the confidence and the support that I needed to be able to go out and face the world. First time I held Finnegan, I just lit up with joy. I was so excited. This little boy that I had in my life, he is loving and generous. Watching him just grow and flourish into this incredible human being has just been so rewarding and so uplifting. Looking back, I don't know what I would do without him, because I needed him more than I think he needed me.
The postmodern age, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance to a degree, and certainly the classical period seem to be popular candidates for secular historians to praise. On the contrary, there's one time period in history that has been slain in the street, especially by secular historians. It is a time, they argue, that history is largely forgotten and sort of just gave way to barbarism and bloodshed, the period known to us as the Dark Ages. To watch more episodes of A Moment in History, go to FISM.tv.
And welcome back to FISM News. Well, let's continue with some national coverage here. People are beginning to express concern that recent infrastructure failures may be a part of a nationwide problem. On Saturday, authorities in Wyoming closed a key interstate road following the partial collapse of the Teton Pass Mountain Road. While there have not been any reported fatalities, the road collapse did apparently cause a motorcycle crash. Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon declared a statewide emergency following the collapse. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, 3 water main breaks flooded city streets and left many residents without access to water. According to a 2021 report from the Society of American Civil Engineers, a water main breaks every 2 minutes in the U.S., leaking enough water to fill over 9,000 swimming pools every day.
It's a really shocking statistic there. Meanwhile, more shocking stats. As school wraps up for the year, teachers say that kids are still feeling the effects of those COVID-19 lockdowns. In a recent survey by Education Week, a majority of teachers said their students are struggling with basic developmental skills, as 94% of teachers said their students have a hard time listening and following instructions, while 85% said kids have trouble sharing with their fellow classmates. Additionally, 77% reported students having a difficult time with common classroom items like pencils and scissors. While lowered test scores have begun to recover post-lockdown, experts are still very concerned that both developmental and academic skills are still much lower than originally expected. They're now urging parents to work with their kids on these skills during the summer months as a result of this new data.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is pushing abortion worldwide, but they are not doing it alone. The WHO approved a new partnership with the Center for Reproductive Rights, or CRR, by a narrow 17-15 vote. According to Life News, the group is a think tank for pro-abortion lawyers. For over 30 years, the organization has sought to undermine national sovereignty and bypass all democratic processes to push their abortion agenda. CRR's website says their work work has impacted over 2.3 billion people worldwide. Republican Congressman Andy Biggs said, quote, "The Center for Reproductive Rights is a radical organization that manipulates international mechanisms to impose abortion on countries." He added, quote, "The group routinely misrepresents the status of abortion in international treaties as well as other human rights issues. There is no obligation in any binding international treaty about abortion."
And turning now to the culture war here in the U.S., the DOJ has now indicted a Texas doctor after he exposed secret transgender treatments at Texas Children's Hospital a couple years ago. Dr. Eitan Haim is appearing in court today on charges related to alleged HIPAA violations. Dr. Haim became a whistleblower in 2022 after Texas Children's publicly said it would shut down its transgender program, only to have it continue in secret.
But it was very soon after that I found out this was categorically untrue. It was only 3 days after they had released that statement that they had implanted a puberty blocking device into an 11-year-old girl with gender dysphoria. And this wasn't just one-off case. Over the next couple of months, this only accelerated.
Now, for some context here, earlier that year, again, that's 2022, Texas AG Ken Paxton said that so-called gender-affirming care for kids could be investigated as child abuse, prompting the hospital to take the whole program underground. Haim said he felt it was his responsibility as a doctor to come forward.
Every kid who walks into that clinic is being told that they have to adopt this identity that's based off hatred of their true self. And if they or their family express even the slightest bit of hesitation, they're going to be threatened with their own suicide. And if these kids do go down that path, they're going to be turned into chronic medical patients. They're going to be permanently tied to the boundaries of a hospital in order to obtain these drugs or manage complications from surgery.
He denies any wrongdoing and says he is simply being targeted for political reasons.
And lastly, and a bit of good news here, Protestant pastoral support for same-sex marriage isn't growing any larger. Lifeway research says that a decade after the government legalized same-sex marriage, most Protestant pastors are still opposed to it. The report says that only 1 in 5 pastors see nothing wrong with those unions. This comes out to 21%, while those who oppose it are at 75%, including 69% who are strongly opposed to same-sex marriage. Another 4% said they weren't sure. Now, while Protestant support for same-sex marriage grew to 24% by 2019, that number has essentially remained the same since then. But younger pastors are more in favor of same-sex marriages than those 55 and older. Nonetheless, Scott McConnell, the executive director of Lifeway, says that the higher numbers of young pastors seeing nothing wrong with same-sex marriage is not yet having much of an impact on overall numbers.
So we'll just have to wait and see. And you said a lot of this is, of course, in the mainline denominations that we're seeing this.
Right. So 46% of mainline Protestants do believe that same-sex marriage should be approved by the church. Yes. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates until next time, you can always follow us on social media or by downloading the FISM app. Thank you so much, God bless, and we'll catch you tomorrow with more news coverage.